Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president, and this is a pre-recorded message to the members of the Arkansas Libertarian Party for those of y'all attending the state convention. Thank you very much for permitting me to share perspectives on the campaign and on liberty with this pre-recorded message. I apologize for not being there in person. I give you my word that if I am elected president of this country, my very first act will be to ask Congress to enact a law that makes it illegal for the Libertarian Party to have more than one state convention per weekend. You know, I discovered the libertarian philosophy some 40 years ago, and it was a real road to Damascus experience. Libertarianism actually changed the course of my life. And one of the big revelations at that experience was that I did not live the life of a free person. You know, all my life I'd been, taught, and it was ingrained in me that I'm an American, I live in a free country. And especially since the first grade in the government schools that my parents had been forced to send me to. And then I discovered this glorious philosophy to which I later devoted my entire life. And I realized that was just a lie. And so I figured, it's got to be really exhilarating to live the life of a free person. And that's the primary reason when people ask me, why are you running for president? I want to live the life of a free person. And I suspect that that's the reason why y'all are at this convention and why you devote so much of your time and energy and efforts and money to this cause and to this party. You want to know what it's like to live the life of a free person. Which brings us to the campaign and why my particular campaign is easily distinguishable from the campaign of all of my opponents in this race. You know, for 25 years, this party has become characterized with a message of reform. Social Security reform, Medicare reform, healthcare reform, immigration reform, monetary reform, educational reform, school vouchers, on and on and on, military reform, drug war reform. But there's a big problem with reform, which is the overall message of my opponents. And that is that reform is not freedom. Any more than reform of slavery would have been freedom for slaves. Reform is reform. It leaves infringements on freedom intact and then simply purports to improve the situation of the serfs that are living under this system. They might well be right about improving our lives, but it's not freedom. To achieve freedom, you've got to dismantle infringements on freedom. If you leave them intact, that's not freedom. Now, if we examine two of the major issues that have arisen in this campaign, we can see more closely what I'm talking about here. And these two issues, which have really come to define the entire campaign since the very first debate, are Social Security and immigration. Now, Social Security is the crown jewel of American socialism. There is no question about the fact that it is a socialist program. They don't call it Social Security for nothing. Americans live without this socialist program for more than 100 years. It came into existence in the 1930s under the presidential regime of Franklin D. Roosevelt. My opponents say that this is a retirement program. It has never been a retirement program from the very beginning. Oh yeah, people pay FICA taxes, but all those taxes are just part of the overall collection of taxes the federal government collects. The money is just spent immediately on such things as the invasions of Afghanistan, Iraq, aid to Ukraine, and so forth. So Social Security is your straight socialist welfare state program. It uses the force of taxation to take money from one group of people and give it to another group of people. So what is my position on Social Security, as well as all other socialist programs, Medicare, Medicaid, and all the rest? Repeal it immediately. Why? Because in order to achieve freedom, you've got to dismantle the infringements on freedom. If you leave them intact, then you're not free. My opponent's position is the exact opposite. They say that if my proposal were to take effect, the immediate repeal of these socialist programs, there'd be people dying in the streets. And therefore, they say, we have to continue this socialist program for the next 25 years, the next generation. Everybody from 65 above is dependent on the money, they say, and therefore, this socialist program has to continue for at least the next 25 years. Now, I suspect that what happens at the end of those 25 years, which I call the 25-year plan for freedom, that the people who are 40 today, who will then be 65, will be saying the same thing. You can't cut this off. We'll be dying in the streets. And we need another 25-year extension. And so it's really a plan not for freedom in 25 years, but it's a plan to continue socialism for the next into perpetuity. Now, notice, though, the message that is sent out with the message sent out by my opponents. It's a message that displays a total lack of faith of freedom. It says that freedom, or the immediate repeal of socialism, or the infringements on freedom, will produce death. People will be dying in the streets, they say. Who's going to vote for that kind of message? I mean, I'd never vote for that kind of message. To vote for a message where a party purports to stand for freedom and against socialism, but then says freedom will produce death and suffering, and therefore we have to continue socialism for the next 25 years, which, by the way, constitutes a continuous 25-year violation of the libertarian non-aggression principle, which is the core principle of our philosophy, as well as a grave violation of the written pledge not to ever support the initiation of force that we all sign. My opponent's plan calls for that continuous violation of those two principles. Now, I believe that it is the role of this party. I've always believed this. Ever since I joined the Libertarian Party in 1990 and served 3 terms on the platform committee, I believe that it is the duty of the Libertarian Party, the moral duty, to lead America to freedom, and that it is the destiny of this party to lead America to freedom. I want to see a revolution out there that ignites freedom. But in order to do that, we need a revolution here in this party that restores faith and freedom, because people out there have lost faith and freedom. This is the insidious nature of socialism. It causes people to have a mindset of hopeless dependency. Oh, people dying in the streets if we get freedom, Jacob. And so in order to start a revolution out there for freedom, we need a revolution here that restores that faith and freedom. And the best place to start is by running a presidential campaign in which the presidential candidate has no doubts, and I have no doubts whatsoever, of the efficacy of freedom. This is the greatest philosophy, the freedom philosophy. It is not a philosophy of people dying in the streets. If you repeal Social Security today, there is no doubt everybody would be fine. There's wealthy people who are on Social Security. They don't even need the money. Okay. Then there's people in the middle that will have to adjust, no doubt about it. Cutting out a few movies a month or a vacation here and there. They might even have to go back to work. Right? There's nothing wrong with that. I'm a senior and I'm still working, and I know a lot of seniors that do. Keeps you into the mainstream of life. Now, there's a class of people that truly need the help. There's no question about it. But that's where the good, caring, charitable hearts of the American people come in. Freedom brings out the best in people. So you've got children and grandchildren who would no longer be paying income taxes or FICA taxes. That's a huge pay increase, enabling them to help parents in need. And there's nothing more gratifying than to help parents who are in need. For those of you that have not yet gone through that experience, it's an opportunity to pay back to your parents everything that they've given to you. It's a very gratifying experience that you cannot get by supporting the faceless bureaucracy of the Social Security Administration. I mean, that's one of my beefs with my opponents, is that they say, we're being good and caring, Jacob, you're not, by supporting the Social Security Administration and the Internal Revenue Service. There's churches of America filled with people, faith-filled people. You'll never convince me that people in those churches would not be more than willing to help out others in need. You've got cousins and other distant family members. You got church groups. You've got neighborhood groups. You've got charitable foundations. There's no doubt in my mind you'd have the foundations for the former Social Security recipients, where people would be flooding them with donations. But now we're talking about real freedom and genuine care and compassion, rather than the so-called care and compassion that comes through the initiation of force. So that's one of the first burning issues. And I say that if we're going to lead America to freedom, we need a campaign that restores that faith in freedom, and that's the campaign that I'm proposing to run here on behalf of your if I were to win your nomination. Now let's talk about immigration, because this is another defining issue of this campaign. I am the only advocate for open borders in this race. All of my opponents for this nomination favor the immigration control system that we've been living under for all of our lives, and that has brought so much death and suffering and kidnappings and rapes and a giant police state along the border, not to mention a perpetual crisis. And this is what all of my opponents and a lot of proponents of immigration controls in this party fail to understand, that the perpetual crisis that comes with immigration is rooted in the system itself. And that's because it's a socialist system. It's a system of central planning. The government is planning the movements of countless people in one of the most complex labor markets in history. It cannot be done. Ludwig von Mises called the results of central planning planned chaos. I mean, what better term to describe the system? And yet, all too many Americans continue to place their faith in the system, including my opponents, because they all have a plan. You know, some of them say, oh, I want the immigration system to be more flexible and easy, to let in more immigrants. And others say, no, I want to finish the Berlin Wall. I want to seal the border. But they all support the government role in this. They put their faith in government, in central planning, and the police state. I mean, I grew up on the border. I spent almost half my life in a border town. And I can tell you that living under a police state is not freedom. And the police state comes with this system of immigration controls that all of my opponents favor in this race. Freedom is not a police state. Warrantless searches, highway checkpoints and the like, this is not freedom. I've said for more than 30 years, there is only one solution to this immigration crisis, and that's open borders. Abolish the Border Patrol, abolish the Immigration Service, abolish all restrictions on the free movements of goods, services, and people across borders. It's the only solution. There is no other solution. It's like the drug war. We see the drug war crisis, we see the cartels. There's only one solution, and that solution is not to crack down or come up with plans on how to make it work. Legalize all drugs. And it's the same with respect to the free movements of people. Now, there's people in the party, I know, that want to move in this direction, which is a Republican direction. But from a straight political standpoint, the immigration control position garners 0 votes. We got to keep that in mind, 0 votes, because every right-wing proponent of immigration controls is going to vote for Donald Trump. He will never waste his vote on a Libertarian Party presidential candidate. But my position favoring open borders, will attract the attention of that block of people out there that I suspect is huge, that are sick and tired of the perpetual crisis, the death, suffering, rapes, police state along the border, and they're just looking for a viable alternative. They've never heard the case for open borders because the party has never made the case for open borders in a presidential campaign in at least 25 years. That's what I would be doing, is making the religious, moral, economic case for open borders, which would attract those votes, which is, I think, a big block of votes that my opponents cannot get in this race. So our job in this party is to lead America to freedom, and in the process garner a large number of votes. Reform cannot do that. We know that. 3 years ago, our presidential candidate got 1.1% reform-oriented. The Wall Street Journal poll, 2 polls have just come out saying that the Libertarian Party candidate for 2024 gets 1%. That's it. I mean, the race is essentially over as far as the LP candidate is concerned, according to those 2 polls. I'm saying let's change that. Let's move America in a totally different direction. And let's move this party in a totally different direction. Let's give the American people something they are totally not expecting. A campaign that rejects reform entirely and runs a campaign that is based totally, without exception, on genuine libertarian principles, open borders, abolish Social Security, Medicare immediately, and all other socialist programs, dismantle the national security state, restore a limited government republic with a basic military force, legalize all drugs, separate education in the state, healthcare in the state, money in the state, economy in the state, and make that case. In this way, I believe this party will then lead America to the highest reaches of freedom, peace, prosperity, and harmony that mankind has ever seen. Thank you very much.